Welcome. Tonight you're invited to slow down. As the world outside grows quiet, allow your mind to drift into a gentler time, when American cities moved softly, when evenings arrived without urgency, and when travel itself felt like rest. This story will guide you through the quiet rhythms of early America, wooden wheels, lamp-lit streets, and unhurried journeys, designed to help you fall into deep, peaceful sleep. If you're listening from somewhere in the United States or anywhere in the world, you're warmly welcome here. Before you relax completely, take a moment to subscribe for more calm history sleep stories. And if you'd like, leave a comment sharing your location so this quiet journey can feel a little more connected. Now, get comfortable. Let your breathing slow and allow the story to carry you gently into rest. The evening arrived gently in America, long before engines learned to hum and streets learned to rush. There was no sudden signal to mark the end of the day, no digital chime or glowing screen demanding attention. Instead, dusk came the way it always had, slowly, patiently, almost politely, allowing the world to settle into itself. The sun lowered without ceremony, casting long shadows that stretched across dirt roads and early stone streets. Buildings stood quietly, their shapes softened by the fading light. Windows reflected the sky's last warm colors, and then, one by one, those reflections dimmed. The air cooled just enough to be noticed, inviting deeper breaths, inviting stillness. In this time before motion became constant, people lived close to their own pace. The day's work ended not with a deadline, but with a feeling. Hands rested when they were tired. Feet stopped moving when the body asked them to. There was no need to hurry home, because home was never far away in spirit, even if it took time to reach on foot. Footsteps were the loudest sounds in the street. They echoed softly, unaccompanied by engines or bells. A person walking home could hear their own rhythm: step, pause, step, each movement unhurried. Conversations, when they happened, were brief and gentle, spoken at a volume that respected the calm of the hour. Horses stood quietly, shifting their weight, their presence calm and familiar. Wagons rested where they had been left, their wooden wheels cooling after a day of modest use. Nothing strained forward, nothing pushed against the evening. The world seemed content to slow down together. As lamps were lit, one flame at a time, the streets gained a warm, steady glow. The light did not reach far, and it did not need to. It was enough to illuminate the moment directly in front of each passer-by. Shadows gathered at the edges, creating a sense of privacy, even outdoors. The night was not something to fear, it was something to ease into. Inside homes, the atmosphere mirrored the quiet outside. Doors closed softly, chairs were pulled closer together. Simple meals were shared without distraction. The absence of noise allowed small sounds to become meaningful: the clink of a spoon, the creak of a wooden floor, the steady breath of someone resting nearby. Time itself seemed to move differently then. Without schedules pressing in, minutes expanded. And evening could feel long in the most comforting way, as though there was room to think, room to rest, simply to exist. The future did not intrude. Tomorrow would arrive when it was ready. In these moments, the idea of shared travel was still forming, though no one spoke of it yet.
People moved together simply by coincidence, by living close to one another, by needing the same paths at the same times. Streets were not yet arteries of urgency, but gentle connectors between lives that unfolded slowly. The silence was not empty. It carried weight, but a reassuring one. It wrapped around the city like a blanket, softening edges and easing minds. Even those still awake felt the pull of rest. The body recognized the signal before the mind did, the signal that it was safe to slow down. Children grew drowsy without protest. Adults felt their thoughts grow less sharp, less demanding. The day loosened its grip. Nothing was left undone that could not wait until morning. Above it all, the sky darkened gradually, stars appearing one by one. They were not obscured by glare or haze. They simply appeared, as they always had, constant and patient. Looking up at them required no effort, no planning, only a pause. This was an America not yet defined by movement, but by presence. Journeys existed, of course, but they were measured in experience rather than distance. A walk home was not lost time, it was time fully lived. Each step allowed the mind to settle, the body to unwind. As night deepened, the streets grew quieter still. Footsteps faded, lamps burned steadily, windows dimmed as families turned inward towards rest. The world did not disappear, it simply became softer, gentler, more forgiving. In this quiet evening before the age of motion, there was a shared understanding, unspoken and universal, that rest was not earned through speed, but through balance, that moving slowly was not a flaw, but a natural state, that stillness held its own kind of strength. And as the night held everything in its calm embrace, the future waited patiently. It would bring wheels and rails and movement beyond imagination. But for now, there was only this: a peaceful evening, a resting world, and the simple comfort of time moving at exactly the right pace.
There was a time in America when the end of the day did not send people searching for rides or waiting for arrivals. There were no schedules to follow, no vehicles to catch, no distance measured by anything other than the steady rhythm of one's own steps. When the day was done, walking was simply the way home. The path back was rarely questioned. It was known by heart, learned through repetition and familiarity rather than maps or signs. Each turn felt natural, guided by memory and instinct. Streets were not crowded corridors, but shared spaces, wide enough for thought, quiet enough for reflection. Walking allowed the body to unwind at its own pace. Muscles loosened gradually. Breathing slowed without effort. The mind followed the body's lead, releasing the concerns of the day with each step forward. There was no urgency to arrive because the journey itself offered something valuable: time. Shoes met the ground with a gentle sound, steady and predictable. Dirt roads softened footsteps. Early stone streets held warmth from the fading sun. The ground beneath felt solid and familiar, a reminder of place and belonging. Each step connected the walker to the land, to the moment, to the calm unfolding around them. Along the way, the world revealed itself in quiet details: a fence casting a long shadow, a porch light glowing faintly, a neighbor sitting silently, watching the evening settle. These moments required no interaction, no acknowledgement. Simply passing by was enough to feel connected. Walking alone did not feel lonely, it felt complete. The absence of noise created space for gentle thoughts to rise and fall.
Some people replayed their day in fragments, not dwelling, just noticing. Others let their minds drift freely, much like their feet. When two people happened to walk the same direction, conversation emerged naturally, or not at all. Silence was comfortable. Words were chosen carefully, spoken softly, never competing with traffic or clamor. When paths eventually separated, there was no abrupt ending, just a nod, a quiet goodbye, and the continuation of individual journeys. The pace of walking shaped the pace of life. Without shortcuts or speed, distances felt honest. A mile was a mile, felt in the legs, counted in breaths. Yet this honesty was comforting, not tiring. It grounded people in the present, reminding them that progress did not need to be rushed to be meaningful. Children learned the rhythm early. Walking beside parents or siblings, they absorbed the calm of the evening without instruction. They noticed small things adults often overlooked, the way light changed as the sun disappeared, the sound of insects beginning their nightly chorus, the cooling air brushing against skin. Homes did not feel far away, even when they were. The steady movement toward rest made the distance feel purposeful. Each step brought a sense of closure to the day, as though walking itself was part of the transition from effort to ease. As darkness deepened, the walk home became even more serene. Lamps lit the way, not brightly, but kindly. Shadows gathered without menace. The familiar route felt safe, known, welcoming. The world did not demand alertness, it encouraged relaxation. Walking also allowed the city or town to breathe. Without constant movement, streets rested alongside the people who used them. Sounds softened. Activity faded naturally rather than stopping abruptly. The evening unfolded like a slow exhale shared by everyone. There was no separation between travel and rest. The walk home was not something to endure before relaxation, it was relaxation itself. It marked the beginning of rest long before the door was reached. By the time home appeared ahead, the body was already slowing, the mind already quiet. Reaching the doorstep felt gentle, not sudden. The transition indoors carried the calm of the walk with it. Shoes were removed slowly. Doors closed softly. The stillness followed, lingering in the air, settling into the walls. In this era, when walking was the only way home, movement was never disconnected from mindfulness. The body led, and the mind followed. The world moved at a pace that respected both. There was no sense of being left behind because everyone moved together, guided by the same limitations and the same understanding. Walking was shared not as an activity, but as a way of life, simple, reliable, unremarkable, and deeply grounding. And as night fully arrived, those final steps home completed more than a journey. They completed the day itself, gently, quietly, without rush, leaving nothing behind except the soft echo of footsteps fading into rest.
The arrival of the first horse-drawn omnibus did not announce itself loudly. There was no grand unveiling, no sudden change in the rhythm of daily life. Instead, it appeared quietly, almost modestly, as though it were unsure of the role it would one day play. It rolled into American streets with wooden wheels, a simple frame, and a patient horse at its front, unhurried, steady, and calm. At first glance, it looked like little more than a wagon with seats. Its design was practical, built for balance rather than beauty. The doors opened with a soft creak. The benches inside were plain, made for sitting rather than comfort. Nothing about it suggested urgency or speed. And yet, it carried with it a new idea, one that would slowly reshape how people moved through their days.
The horse-drawn omnibus followed familiar paths. It did not demand new roads or special routes. It shared the street with walkers, wagons, and horses, blending into the existing flow rather than disrupting it. Its pace matched the world around it, slow enough to feel safe, steady enough to feel reliable. For those who chose to ride, the experience was gentle. Stepping inside felt less like boarding a vehicle and more like entering a shared room that happened to move. Passengers sat side by side, facing forward, their presence quiet and respectful. There was no expectation of conversation, no pressure to engage. Silence was welcomed, even appreciated. As the omnibus moved forward, the sound of hooves against the road created a soothing rhythm. The wheels turned slowly, their motion predictable and calming. The ride did not jolt or rush. It swayed slightly, reminding everyone inside that motion could still be soft, still be kind. Windows framed the street outside like a series of passing scenes. Shops, homes, and trees drifted by at a pace that allowed the eye to linger. Nothing was blurred, nothing was missed. The world unfolded naturally, one moment at a time. For many, this was the first experience of traveling without walking the entire distance, and yet it did not feel like a separation from the world outside. Riders remained connected to the street, to the air, to the sounds around them. The omnibus did not enclose, it accompanied. The horse leading the way moved with familiarity and calm. Guided by gentle signals, it knew the route well. There was trust in that movement, trust built on routine rather than speed. The animal's steady presence set the tone for the journey, reminding passengers that this new form of travel still depended on patience and care. Time inside the omnibus felt suspended, neither hurried nor slow. It existed in its own quiet pocket, allowing riders to rest their bodies while their minds wandered freely. Some looked out the window without focus, others closed their eyes, lulled by the motion and sound. The act of paying a fare was simple and unremarkable, a small exchange handled without ceremony. It was not about efficiency, it was about access. The omnibus offered a shared solution to shared needs, without complexity or demand. Stops were gentle pauses rather than abrupt interruptions. The omnibus slowed gradually, doors opened, a passenger stepped down, another stepped up. The journey continued without tension, without sharp edges. Everything about the experience encouraged ease. For those still walking alongside, the omnibus did not feel threatening or intrusive. It passed quietly, leaving the street much as it found it. Its presence suggested possibility, not replacement. Walking remained central, but now there was an option, a subtle expansion of choice. As evening approached, the omnibus became even more peaceful. The light softened, the horse's pace remained unchanged. Inside, passengers grew quieter, their bodies naturally preparing for rest. The ride felt like an extension of the evening itself, easing the transition from work to home. No one yet spoke of transformation or progress. The omnibus was simply there, doing its quiet work, carrying people gently from one part of their lives to another. Its impact would only be understood later, looking back. In the moment, it felt ordinary, and that was its greatest strength. The first horse-drawn omnibus did not rush America forward. It walked beside it, matching its pace, respecting its rhythms. It introduced motion without urgency, connection without noise, and shared travel without disruption. And as it rolled slowly through the streets, guided by steady hooves and patient hands, it offered something rare and enduring, a reminder that even as the world begins to move together, it does not have to move fast.
When wooden wheels first met cobbled streets, the sound they made was neither sharp nor alarming. It was a low, steady rhythm, measured, familiar, almost soothing. The stones beneath were uneven by nature, shaped by time and use rather than precision. Together, wheel and street created a gentle conversation of movement, one that blended easily into the background of daily life. Cobbled streets had a presence of their own. Each stone carried the marks of countless footsteps, hooves, and slow-moving wagons. They were laid carefully, but not perfectly, allowing small variations that softened movement instead of controlling it. Walking across them required attention, encouraging a natural slowing of pace. As wooden wheels rolled across these stones, they followed the street's lead. The motion was never smooth in the modern sense, but it was steady. Each rise and dip reminded passengers that they were still connected to the ground beneath them. The ride invited awareness without demanding effort. The sound of wheels on stone traveled gently through the air, recognizable but not intrusive. It became part of the city's evening music, joining footsteps, distant voices, and the occasional call of a horse. No sound dominated. Everything existed in balance. From inside the omnibus or wagon, the movement felt rhythmic. The slight sway lulled the body, creating a sense of ease. It was easy to sit back, hands resting quietly, and let the motion carry you forward. The journey asked nothing more than presence. Outside, the streets remained calm. Wooden wheels did not tear at the stones or demand space. They respected the path, moving at a pace that allowed walkers to share the road without concern. The street belonged to everyone, and the wheels understood this unspoken agreement. Light played differently on cobbled streets as evening approached. Shadows settled into the spaces between stones, deepening their texture. Lamps reflected softly off worn surfaces, creating patterns that shifted slowly as vehicles passed. The movement was subtle, never startling. Horses guiding the wheels walked carefully, their hooves finding familiar footing. There was trust in this motion, built through routine and care. The horse felt the street as much as the wheels did, adjusting naturally, without instruction. Passengers noticed these details without focusing on them. The ride encouraged a gentle awareness, a sense of being carried rather than transported. Time loosened its grip, thoughts drifted. The body responded to the steady rhythm by relaxing further with each passing block. Cobbled streets also shaped the pace of the city itself. They discouraged haste. Quick movement felt out of place, unnecessary. Instead, the streets rewarded patience, offering stability to those willing to move with them rather than against them. As neighborhoods changed, the stones remained constant. Familiar routes gained a comforting predictability. The sound of wheels approaching became a signal of continuity, not disruption. Life continued at the same measured pace. In quieter moments, when traffic thinned and evening deepened, the sound of wooden wheels felt almost like a heartbeat, steady, reassuring, and grounding. It marked the passage of time without counting it, reminding listeners that movement did not have to mean urgency. Homes lining the streets responded to this calm. Curtains stirred gently, lights dimmed gradually. The outside world did not intrude. It passed by respectfully, carried on wheels that knew how to move without disturbing rest. Even those still walking found comfort in the shared rhythm. The sound of wheels provided company without conversation, presence without obligation. It was enough to know that others were moving too, carried along the same streets toward the same quiet end of day. The wooden wheels wore slowly, shaped over time by the storms beneath them, and the stones, in turn, smoothed themselves through contact. Neither hurried the other. Both adapted, gradually, patiently.
This relationship between wheel and street reflected a broader truth of the era. Progress arrived not as a force, but as a companion. It moved carefully, listening to the ground, responding to the environment, allowing the world to adjust naturally. As night settled fully over the city, the cobbled streets rested again. Wheels passed less frequently, sounds softened further. The stones held the warmth of the day, releasing it slowly into the cool air. And in that quiet, the memory of wooden wheels rolling gently across cobbled streets lingered, not as noise, not as motion, but a calm reminder that even change can arrive softly, leaving peace undisturbed.
Early city life in America moved at a pace that felt human, shaped by daylight, weather, and the natural limits of the body. A ride through these cities was never about speed or efficiency. It was about participation, being present within the slow, steady unfolding of everyday moments. As the omnibus or wagon began its gentle journey, the city revealed itself gradually. Streets were not crowded corridors, but shared spaces, alive yet unhurried. Shops closed their doors one by one, not all at once, but according to habit and need. A baker swept the threshold. A shopkeeper paused to adjust a lamp. These small acts carried no urgency. They belonged to the rhythm of the evening. From a seat by the window, the city appeared framed and softened. Buildings passed slowly enough to be recognized, remembered. Brick and wood stood side by side, each bearing quiet signs of use: worn steps, faded paint, open windows catching the last light of day. Nothing rushed past. Everything had time to be seen. The ride itself felt steady and reassuring. The gentle movement allowed bodies to rest without fully stopping. Muscles loosened, shoulders lowered. Breathing deepened without instruction. The city seemed to support this easing, offering no sudden noises or sharp turns to interrupt the calm. People inside the vehicle shared the space quietly. They sat with comfortable distance, aware of one another without needing interaction. A nod might be exchanged, sometimes nothing at all. The silence felt natural, not awkward. It was a shared understanding that the ride was a time for unwinding, not engaging. Outside, walkers moved alongside for a while, their pace matching the vehicles. For a few moments, everyone traveled together, some seated, some on foot, connected by direction rather than conversation. Eventually, paths separated, but the sense of shared movement remained. Early cities held a balance between activity and rest. Even as commerce and craft shaped the day, evenings softened those edges. The ride through town reflected this balance, carrying people away from effort and toward ease. The vehicle did not remove them from the city, it guided them gently through it. Street sounds blended into a quiet backdrop, the murmur of voices, the distant clatter of dishes, the occasional call of an animal settling for the night. None of it overwhelmed the senses. Instead, it formed a steady hum that encouraged stillness rather than alertness. Children sometimes rode alongside adults, their curiosity slowly giving way to calm. At first, their eyes followed every movement outside. Over time, their attention faded, replaced by the gentle sway of the ride. Heads leaned against shoulders. The city passed by unnoticed, doing its quiet work of easing the day to a close. Light shifted gradually as the ride continued. The sky deepened from soft blue to darker tones. Lamps glowed warmer against the growing night. Shadows lengthened, then blended together. The city did not disappear. It simplified, offering fewer details, fewer demands. The ride gave structure to the transition between public life and private rest. It allowed the mind to move away from tasks and toward reflection without effort.
Thoughts slowed, concerns softened. The simple act of being carried forward was enough to signal that the day was ending. Even those who rode the same route daily experienced it differently each time. A new sound, a different light, a moment of stillness where yesterday there had been movement. Early city life was consistent but never identical, offering comfort without monotony. As neighborhoods changed, the atmosphere shifted subtly. Commercial streets gave way to quieter residential ones. The energy faded naturally without abrupt stops. Homes appeared closer together, windows glowed faintly. The ride seemed to grow even gentler, as if aware that rest was near. There was no sense of arrival being the goal. The journey itself held value. It allowed people to exist between roles, no longer working, not yet fully at home. This in-between space was where relaxation began, long before doors opened or shoes were removed. For the city itself, these gentle rides stitched daily life together. They connected places without forcing speed, supported growth without erasing calm. Movement and stillness coexisted, each respecting the other. As the ride neared its end, there was no sudden awareness, no sudden return to alertness. The calm lingered. Stepping down felt natural, unhurried. The city did not rush anyone away. It allowed them to take the quiet with them. In these early cities, a gentle ride was more than transportation. It was a shared pause, a moving moment of rest, carrying people softly through the ordinary beauty of daily life, leaving them calmer than when they began, ready to welcome the night.
When the streetcar became part of American city life, it arrived not as a disruption, but as a continuation. Its presence followed the same gentle logic as the movements that came before it. Though guided by tracks, it did not feel confined or hurried. Instead, it settled into the city with an unspoken agreement to move at a pace that matched the world around it. The streetcar's rhythm was steady and predictable. Wheels met wheels with a soft, repeating sound, a quiet pattern that soon became familiar. It was a sound that blended easily into the background, never demanding attention. For many, it became part of the city's natural evening music, as comforting as footsteps or distant voices. Boarding the streetcar felt simple and calm. Passengers stepped on without urgency, finding seats or standing comfortably. There was no sense of competition, no rush to claim space. The streetcar waited patiently, as if it understood that movement should never interrupt ease. Once in motion, the streetcar glided forward with a gentle sway. The rails guided it smoothly, removing the need for constant adjustment. This steadiness allowed bodies to relax almost immediately. Hands rested loosely, shoulders softened. The rhythm of the ride encouraged the mind to follow suit. The city passed by at a pace that invited observation without focus. Buildings, trees, and storefronts moved slowly enough to be recognized, yet steadily enough to fade into a soothing blur of familiarity. The streetcar did not rush the view. It offered each scene just long enough to be noticed, then gently let go. Inside, the atmosphere was quiet and respectful. Conversations, if they happened at all, were low and unintrusive. More often, passengers shared the space in silence, each wrapped in their own thoughts. The shared rhythm created a sense of calm connection without requiring interaction. Stops along the route were gentle pauses rather than interruptions. The streetcar slowed gradually, coming to rest without jolting. Doors opened, one or two passengers stepped off, others stepped on. The process unfolded without pressure. Then the car resumed its steady course. The unhurried nature of the streetcar influenced how people experienced time. Minutes no longer felt segmented or measured. Instead, time flowed evenly, marked by distance rather than clocks. The journey had a beginning and an end, but no urgency in between. Outside, pedestrians moved alongside the streetcar for short stretches. Their pace often matched its rhythm, creating brief moments of shared movement. For a time, everyone traveled together, guided by the same calm tempo, before naturally drifting apart. As evening approached, the streetcar seemed to grow quieter still. The light softened, the sound of wheels on rails became more subdued. Passengers grew more still, their bodies responding instinctively to the approaching night. The ride became a bridge between the activity of the day and the rest awaiting at home. Children, when present, mirrored this calm. Their curiosity slowly gave way to drowsiness. The steady motion, the predictable sounds, the gentle lighting, all combined to ease them toward rest without effort. The streetcar also shaped the city's character. Its fixed routes encouraged consistency. Neighborhoods grew accustomed to its presence, to the quiet assurance that it would pass by at regular intervals, neither early nor late. It became a reliable thread woven through daily life. There was comfort in that reliability. Knowing the streetcar would arrive and depart without rush allowed people to trust the rhythm of their surroundings. The city felt less demanding, more accommodating, shaped around human needs rather than pushing against them. As the ride continued, thoughts naturally slowed. The mind found space to wander without direction. Some passengers watched the passing world without really seeing it. Others closed their eyes briefly, supported by the steady motion beneath them. Approaching a stop did not break the calm. The streetcar signaled its arrival gently. Passengers prepared to leave without haste. Stepping off felt like a continuation rather than an ending. The calm of the ride carried forward into the walk home. In this way, the unhurried rhythm of the streetcar offered more than transportation. It provided a shared experience of steadiness and ease, a moving reminder that progress did not require speed. As the streetcar rolled on through the quieting city, guided by rails and patience, it carried with it a simple lesson, that movement, when done thoughtfully, can be as restful as stillness, and that sometimes the most meaningful journeys are the ones that never rush to arrive.
In the calm flow of early public transit, certain details became familiar companions, small elements that shaped the experience without drawing attention to themselves. Bells, benches, and quiet conversations formed a gentle framework around each journey, offering comfort through repetition and simplicity. The bell was often the first sound noticed, though it was never sharp or startling. It rang softly, announcing departures and arrivals with a tone meant to inform, not demand. Its sound carried just far enough to be useful, then faded back into the surrounding calm. Over time, the bell became reassuring, a signal that movement would continue steadily and safely. Inside the vehicle, benches lined the space in simple rows. They were wooden and unadorned, shaped by use rather than design. Sitting on them felt honest and grounding. There was no expectation of luxury. The benches offered rest, and that was enough. Passengers settled onto the benches with ease. Bags were placed carefully. Hands rested in laps. The simple act of sitting together created a shared stillness, even as the vehicle moved forward. Each bench held its quiet history of journeys taken and completed without urgency. The sound of the bell blended seamlessly with the gentle hum of motion. It marked transitions without disrupting them. When the bell rang, no one startled. It was an expected part of the rhythm, like a breath taken at the right moment. Quiet conversations sometimes emerged, but they were never forced. A few words exchanged between neighbors, a brief comment about the weather, a soft acknowledgement of shared direction. Voices remained low, respecting the collective calm of the space. Silence, however, was the most common companion. It filled the vehicle without weight or awkwardness. In that silence, people found room to think or to rest their thoughts entirely.
The absence of noise felt intentional, as though everyone understood its value. The benches supported this calm by encouraging stillness. Their firmness invited upright posture, gentle awareness, and rest without sinking. Sitting there, passengers remained present without effort, carried by motion, but grounded by their seat. Outside, the bell signaled to the street as well. Pedestrians heard it and adjusted naturally, stepping aside without hurry. The sound communicated intention, not urgency. It allowed everyone to share the space smoothly. As evening approached, the tone of the bell felt even softer, blending with the deepening quiet of the city. The sound traveled through the air briefly, then disappeared, leaving calm in its wake. Conversations, when they occurred, rarely lasted long, a few sentences, then a comfortable return to silence. There was no pressure to continue speaking. Words were allowed to rest once they had served their purpose. Children, when present, responded to these sounds instinctively. The bell did not excite them, it reassured them. The steady environment encouraged their energy to settle, their attention to drift. The simplicity of benches and bells reflected the broader spirit of the time. Function mattered, but so did ease. Everything existed to support the journey, not to complicate it. As the vehicle moved along its route, familiar faces appeared and disappeared. Regular riders recognized one another without formal introduction, a nod, a brief smile, then quiet again. Community formed through presence rather than conversation. The rhythm of the ride remained unbroken. Bells rang when needed, benches held their passengers, the city passed by without interruption. Each element played its role without competing for attention. When it was time to leave, the bell signaled gently once more. Passengers stood slowly, stepping down without rush. Conversations, if any, ended naturally. Silence followed them off the vehicle, lingering like a soft echo. In this environment, travel did not overwhelm the senses, it soothed them. Bells, benches, and quiet conversations worked together to create a space where movement felt safe, familiar, and calm. As the journey continued day after day, these simple details became part of memory. Long after the ride ended, the soft ring of a bell or the feel of a wooden bench could recall a sense of ease. And in that way, the ordinary elements of early transit offered something lasting, a reminder that even shared spaces can remain peaceful, and that sometimes the quietest moments carry us the farthest.
The windows of early public transit were not large or ornate, but they offered something quietly meaningful. They framed the world outside in simple rectangles, turning ordinary American days into slow-moving scenes that unfolded with gentle consistency. Looking through them required no effort, no intention beyond being present. From a seat by the window, the city appeared softened. The glass filtered the air, the sounds, and even the light, creating a calm distance between the rider and the street. What passed by was familiar. Homes, shops, trees, people going about their routines, but seen from this steady, moving frame, it felt newly composed. The ride transformed everyday life into a series of moments, each one complete on its own. A person sweeping a doorstep, a child walking beside a parent, a storefront closing its shutters for the evening. None of these scenes demanded attention, yet each offered a quiet sense of connection. Windows encouraged stillness. With nothing to do but sit and watch, the body relaxed naturally. Eyes followed the slow movement outside without strain. The mind wandered gently, anchored just enough by the passing view to remain calm. The pace of the vehicle allowed these scenes to linger. Nothing rushed past. Each block offered time to notice small details, the way light rested on brick, the movement of leaves in the evening air,
the soft shadows gathering along fences. The ordinary revealed its quiet beauty simply by being given time. As neighborhoods shifted, the view changed subtly. Busy streets gave way to quieter ones. Commercial spaces faded into residential calm. The windows framed this transition without comment, allowing the rider to feel the gradual easing of the day. Inside, the vehicle remained quiet. Conversations were minimal, leaving the view to speak for itself. The shared act of watching created a sense of unity without words. Everyone was seeing the same world, framed differently only by their seat. Children often pressed closer to the glass at first, curious about every passing detail. Over time, their interest softened. The steady motion and repeating patterns eased their focus, inviting rest. Heads leaned back, eyes grew heavy. The window continued its gentle work. For adults, the view offered something deeper, a reminder of continuity. The same streets, the same routines, day after day. Life unfolding steadily, without urgency. The ride through these familiar scenes reassured them that the world was moving as it should. Even weather added to the calm. Rain softened the view, turning lights into gentle reflections. Snow muted sound and movement alike. Sunlight filtered in warm tones as evening approached. Each condition altered the scene without changing its essence. The window did not isolate riders from the world. It offered perspective. It allowed them to observe without participating, to rest without withdrawing completely. This balance was comforting, especially at the end of a long day. As the vehicle continued, the repetition of scenes became soothing. Similar houses, similar streets, similar moments. The mind responded by letting go of the need to analyze or anticipate. The present moment became enough. Approaching a familiar stop, riders recognized the signs without effort. A certain corner, a specific building. The view signaled arrival gently, without alarm. There was no need to watch closely. The body simply knew. Stepping away from the window did not break the calm. The images lingered softly, carried forward into the walk home. The day felt complete, framed and settled. In these early rides, windows did more than provide light or air. They shaped how people experienced their surroundings, turning movement into observation and observation into rest. They reminded riders that ordinary days held quiet richness, visible only when time allowed for noticing. And as the vehicle rolled on, windows continued to frame those ordinary American days, steadily, gently, until the scenes faded into evening, and the rider carried that calm forward into the night.
As American cities began to grow, their expansion did not happen all at once or in sweeping movements. It unfolded through countless small journeys, short rides, familiar routes, daily passages that quietly stitched neighborhoods together. These journeys were modest in distance but profound in their impact, shaping how people experienced their cities and one another. Early public transit did not aim to erase distance, it respected it. The routes followed natural lines of movement, connecting places that were already linked by habit and need. Each journey felt purposeful, not because it was long, but because it was shared. Passengers boarded knowing roughly where they were headed, but without fixating on arrival. The ride itself held value. It offered a moment of rest, a gentle transition between parts of the city that felt distinct yet connected by routine. As the vehicle moved forward, it carried people across invisible boundaries. A street where work was done gave way to a street where homes stood quietly. Markets faded into residential calm. These shifts happened gradually, allowing riders to feel the city change beneath them rather than announcing it abruptly. The small journeys created familiarity. Seeing the same faces, passing the same buildings, moving through the same turns day after day built a sense of belonging. The city became understandable, navigable, and comforting. These rides connected more than places, they connected rhythms. The morning had its own pace, the evening had another. Transit adapted to both without imposing urgency. It simply moved, steady and reliable. For growing cities, this consistency mattered. It allowed expansion without chaos. New neighborhoods emerged, but they were not isolated. They were woven into the existing fabric through routes that honored continuity. Passengers experienced this growth quietly. They noticed new buildings appearing along familiar streets. Empty lots slowly filled in. The ride changed slightly over time, but never all at once. The city grew the same way the journey unfolded, incrementally, gently. The scale of these small journeys encouraged patience. A few blocks, a short ride, a steady walk at the end. Nothing felt overwhelming. The city remained approachable, its size manageable through repetition and routine. Inside the vehicle, the shared nature of travel reinforced connection. People from different parts of the city sat side by side, not as strangers passing quickly, but as neighbors sharing a moment of stillness. The ride created a temporary community without requiring interaction. Even silence felt connective. Knowing others were traveling the same route, relying on the same gentle system, created trust. The city felt dependable, shaped by collective movement rather than individual haste. Children grew up within these small journeys. They learned the city not through maps, but through memory. Certain turns meant home was near. Certain stops signaled change. The ride taught them geography through experience, grounded and calm. As cities expanded outward, these modest connections became more important, not less. They ensured that growth did not fracture daily life. Each new street, each new neighborhood found its place within the existing rhythm. Even at the edges of the city, the journey remained familiar. The vehicle arrived without spectacle, offering the same benches, the same gentle motion, the same predictable pace. This consistency reassured those living farther out that they remained part of the whole. Evening rides were especially meaningful. They gathered people from across the city and carried them back toward rest. The shared direction created a sense of collective winding down, as though the entire city was preparing for night together. These small journeys did not aim to impress, they aimed to connect. Their strength lay in repetition, reliability, and restraint. They allowed cities to grow without losing their sense of calm. As time passed, these routes became threads of memory. People remembered their cities not as vast spaces, but as sequences of familiar rides and walks. The city was known through experience, not abstraction. In the end, it was these small journeys that held growing cities together. Not grand movements or sweeping changes, but quiet rides taken day after day, carrying people gently through a city that grew around them, connected not by speed, but by shared, steady motion.
In the early days of public transit, much of the experience was shaped not only by the vehicles themselves, but by the people and small rituals that made each journey feel steady and respectful. Conductors, tickets, and simple courtesy formed an unspoken framework that guided movement without pressure, creating an atmosphere of quiet order. The conductor's presence was calm and familiar. Dressed simply, moving with purpose, they did not command attention. Their role was understood without explanation. They moved through the vehicle with ease, greeting passengers softly, collecting fares without interruption, and offering guidance only when needed. There was no sense of authority pressing down on the space. The conductor acted more as a steward than an enforcer, maintaining balance rather than control. Their calm demeanor set the tone for the ride, signaling that everything was proceeding as it should. Tickets were small and unremarkable, simple pieces of paper passed hand to hand without ceremony. The exchange was brief, almost meditative in its repetition. Coin placed in palm, ticket received, a nod. The ritual required no words, yet it affirmed mutual respect. Passengers prepared their fare without haste. No one rushed the process. The ride accommodated the rhythm of human movement, allowing each exchange to unfold naturally. Even small delays felt acceptable, part of the shared experience rather than an inconvenience. Courtesy extended beyond the transaction. Riders offered seats without being asked, bags were moved to make space, movements were careful, intentional. There was an understanding that the space was shared and that comfort depended on cooperation. The absence of noise supported this courtesy. Without raised voices or sharp signals, people became more aware of one another's presence. The quiet encouraged thoughtfulness. Actions were measured, nothing felt abrupt. Conductors signaled stops gently, often with a bell or soft call. The sound was informative, not commanding. Passengers responded in kind, preparing to exit without rushing, stepping aside to allow others to move freely. Children observed these interactions closely. They learned not through instruction, but through example. Courtesy was modeled in every small gesture, becoming part of the rhythm of daily life. Even disagreements, when they occurred, were softened by the environment. The pace of the ride, the calm presence of the conductor, and the shared understanding of routine all worked to ease tension before it could take hold. The simplicity of tickets reflected the simplicity of expectations. There were no complicated rules to navigate. One ticket meant one ride. The clarity removed anxiety, allowing passengers to focus on the journey rather than the system. As the ride continued, the conductor moved quietly through the space, adjusting small details as needed. A window opened slightly, a bench cleared. Their presence was felt without being noticed, like a steady current guiding the flow. Courtesy also extended outward beyond the vehicle. Conductors acknowledged pedestrians, riders stepped down carefully, mindful of the street and those sharing it. The transition from transit to walking felt seamless, governed by the same respect. In the evening, these small courtesies became even more meaningful. As fatigue settled in, the calm structure of the ride supported tired bodies and minds. The predictability of interactions reduced effort, allowing passengers to relax more fully. Regular riders recognized conductors over time. Familiar faces exchanged quiet greetings. Trust grew naturally, built on consistency rather than conversation. The system felt personal without being intrusive. This atmosphere of simple courtesy shaped how people experienced public space. The ride became a place where civility was practiced daily, reinforced by repetition and shared expectation. As cities grew and transit systems expanded, these early practices laid a foundation. They showed that movement did not require force, and that order could emerge from mutual respect rather than strict enforcement. In these early journeys, conductors, tickets, and simple courtesy worked together to create something larger than the sum of their parts, a moving space where people felt seen, supported, and unhurried. And as passengers stepped off at the end of their ride, they carried that calm forward, reminded that even in shared spaces, gentleness could guide the way.
Evenings in early American cities softened gradually, as though the day itself understood the need to let go. There was no sudden shift from light to dark, no sharp signal to mark the end of activity. Instead, lamplight appeared one glow at a time, gently guiding people home. As the sun lowered, streets grew quieter. Movement continued, but with less urgency. The final rides of the day carried passengers who were already beginning to rest, their bodies easing into the slower rhythm of night. The journey home felt less like travel and more like transition. Lamps lined the streets with a warm, steady presence. Their light did not stretch far, and it did not need to. It illuminated just enough, each step, each turn, each familiar doorway. Shadows gathered at the edges, creating a sense of calm enclosure rather than uncertainty. From the window of a streetcar or omnibus, lamplight framed the city in gentle contrast. Pools of light appeared and faded as the vehicle passed, marking progress without counting time. The rhythm of brightness and shadow soothed the senses, encouraging the mind to slow. Passengers inside the vehicle grew quieter as evening deepened. Conversations faded naturally. Movements became more deliberate. The ride itself seemed to acknowledge the time of day, carrying people with extra care, as though mindful of their fatigue. Stepping down at a familiar stop, the transition felt seamless. The calm of the ride continued into the walk home. Streets under lamplight felt safe and known, shaped by repetition and memory. Each block carried the reassurance of routine. Homes emerged softly from the darkness. Windows glowed faintly. Doors stood ready. The sight of these small lights signaled arrival long before the doorstep was reached. The body responded by slowing further, preparing to rest. Footsteps echoed gently on quiet streets. The sounds of the day had receded, leaving space for subtler notes: the rustle of leaves, the distant closing of a door, the quiet settling of the city itself. Children walked close to parents, their energy already fading. The steady light guided them forward without excitement. Their attention drifted inward, drawn by the promise of warmth and rest waiting ahead. Lamplight also softened the edges of memory. The events of the day felt less sharp, less demanding. The walk home allowed thoughts to loosen, to fall away naturally. By the time the door was reached, much of the day had already been set down. The glow from lamps reflected off cobbled streets, creating patterns that moved slowly with each step. These small visual rhythms mirrored the body's pace, reinforcing the sense of calm. Inside the city, activity did not vanish, it transformed. Shops closed quietly, conversations moved indoors. The public world dimmed without disappearing, leaving behind a quieter version of itself. Returning home by lamplight felt communal, even when done alone. Knowing others were making the same gentle journey created a shared sense of closure. The city, in its own way, was going to rest alongside its residents. Opening the door marked the final transition. The outside world remained calm, held by lamplight and quiet streets. Inside, warmth and stillness welcomed the traveler home. Shoes were removed slowly. Lamps inside were lit to match the softness outside. The rhythm established during the journey continued, guiding the rest of the evening without effort. These evenings, shaped by lamplight and gentle movement, left no sharp edges. They carried people home not just in body, but in mind, easing them toward rest long before sleep arrived. And as lamps continued to glow quietly along the streets, they watched over countless returns, each one unhurried, familiar, and calm, until the city settled fully into night.
There came a time in early American public transit when silence was no longer something that simply happened. It became part of the experience itself, an unspoken agreement shared by everyone on board. This silence was not forced, not instructed, and not expected in words. It arrived naturally, settling into the space the same way evening settled into the streets. As passengers boarded, they brought with them the quiet of the day's end. The vehicle welcomed it. Sounds were present, but minimal and familiar. The gentle movement beneath the floor, the soft ring of a bell, the faint shifting of weight as someone found their seat. Between these sounds, silence lived comfortably. No one felt the need to fill it. Words were used sparingly, only when necessary, and even then they were offered in low tones. Conversations did not disappear entirely, but they softened,
respecting the calm that surrounded them. Silence was no longer absence, it was presence. The ride itself encouraged this stillness. The steady rhythm of motion invited the body to relax. Muscles released tension without instruction. Breathing slowed naturally. The mind followed, easing away from the day's demands and settling into a quieter state. Without noise to compete for attention, awareness shifted inward. Thoughts came and went gently, without urgency. Some passengers reflected briefly on their day. Others let their minds drift freely, guided only by the subtle movement of the ride. The silence made small details more noticeable. The predictable sway of the vehicle felt reassuring. The repetition of motion created a sense of safety, as though the ride itself were keeping watch. Each moment felt complete, requiring nothing more. Children responded instinctively to this environment. Without stimulation pulling at their attention, their energy faded. Heads leaned back, eyes grew heavy. The ride became a quiet bridge between wakefulness and rest. Adults, too, found relief in the shared quiet. The silence offered permission to stop performing, stop responding, stop planning. For a short while, it was enough simply to be carried. The conductor moved through the space with care, mindful of the calm that had formed. Even necessary actions were done gently, preserving the atmosphere. The silence held steady, absorbing small movements without breaking. Stops along the route did not disrupt this quiet. The vehicle slowed gradually, doors opened softly, passengers stepped off or on without haste. The silence adjusted, then settled again, uninterrupted. Outside, the city mirrored this calm. Evening sounds were muted, footsteps softened. The world beyond the windows appeared quieter, as though responding to the same rhythm. Over time, regular riders came to expect this silence. It became as familiar as the route itself. The ride was no longer just a way to get home. It was part of the transition into night. This shared quiet created connection without conversation. Knowing others were resting their minds alongside you brought a sense of comfort. The ride felt communal in the gentlest way possible. Silence also shaped behavior. Movements were careful, gestures were restrained, courtesy flowed naturally, supported by awareness rather than rules. The space felt balanced and considerate. As evening deepened, the silence seemed to grow richer. It layered itself with familiar sounds and steady motion, creating an environment that felt protected from the outside world's urgency. When the journey ended, passengers stepped off already softened by the ride. The silence followed them into the street, into the walk home, into the final moments of the day. In these early rides, silence became more than a lack of sound. It became a shared experience, a quiet companion that carried everyone gently forward, preparing them without effort for the rest that awaited.
The horse-drawn era did not end with a sudden departure. It did not vanish overnight or retreat with fanfare. Instead, it faded slowly, the way daylight eases into dusk, quietly, patiently, without resistance. For a long while, the familiar presence of horses and wooden vehicles remained woven into daily life, even as new forms of movement began to appear. At first, nothing felt different. Horses still waited calmly at the curb. Wagons and omnibuses still traced their familiar routes. The streets still carried the gentle rhythm of hooves and wheels. The city continued to move as it always had, guided by habits shaped over many years. But gradually, subtle changes emerged. A new sound appeared in the distance. A different kind of vehicle passed by, moving with a steadiness that felt unfamiliar but not unsettling. The old and the new shared the streets for a time, existing side by side without conflict. Horses remained patient companions throughout this transition. They stood calmly, unaware that their role was slowly changing. Their presence continued to set the tone of the street, measured, grounded, and unhurried. Even as alternatives emerged, the horse-drawn vehicles carried on, faithful to their routines. Passengers still boarded as they always had, benches still creaked softly, wheels still rolled over familiar ground. The ride remained gentle, shaped by the same rhythms that had defined it for years. For those inside, the experience did not feel like something nearing its end. It felt complete, whole, and sufficient. The streets themselves seemed to hold on to these movements. Cobbled stones remembered the weight of hooves. Routes worn smooth by repetition guided each journey. The city had grown alongside horse-drawn travel, and it did not let go easily. As time passed, the presence of horses became slightly less common, though no one marked the moment. A familiar route ran a little quieter. A stable closed its doors without ceremony. These changes unfolded slowly enough to feel natural rather than disruptive. People adapted without urgency. New forms of transit were observed with curiosity, not haste. There was no rush to replace what had worked so well. The calm pace of the horse-drawn era had shaped expectations, and change followed that same restraint. Even as alternatives gained ground, many continued to prefer the familiar ride. The gentle sway, the steady rhythm, the living presence at the front of the vehicle. These qualities offered comfort that could not be easily replicated. The ride felt alive, guided by shared trust between human and animal. The evenings still belonged to quiet movement. Horses returned to their stables, streets softened under lamplight. The city continued to wind down at its accustomed pace. The presence of something new did not erase the value of what remained. Eventually, the horse-drawn vehicles appeared less frequently. They became part of memory even as they continued to exist. Seeing one pass by felt comforting, like hearing a familiar song from another time. It reminded people of a pace they had once lived by fully. The transition did not feel like loss. It felt like completion. The horse-drawn era had done its work. It had connected cities, shaped routines, and taught a rhythm of movement grounded in patience and care. As the streets changed, the lessons remained. The idea that travel could be calm, that shared spaces could be quiet, that progress did not need to arrive loudly. These truths carried forward even as the vehicles themselves faded from daily use. In the end, the horse-drawn era did not disappear. It settled into the background of the city's memory, influencing what came next without demanding recognition. Its spirit lived on in the continued desire for gentle movement and unhurried journeys. And as the last of these rides became rare, the streets remembered. They held the echoes of hooves and wheels, the calm transitions from day to night, the steady pace that once defined them. The slow fade of the horse-drawn era was not an ending, but a quiet turning, one that left behind a lasting sense of balance, reminding future generations that even as cities grow and change, there is value in moving gently and wisdom in letting progress arrive without haste.
Long after the routes changed and the vehicles evolved, the feeling of unrushed travel remained, quietly stored in memory, ready to return in moments of stillness. It lived not in schedules or systems, but in the body's recollection of moving without hurry, of being carried through space with patience and care. These memories surfaced gently. Sometimes they appeared as a sensation rather than an image, the remembered sway of a ride, the soft rhythm beneath one's feet, the sense of time expanding instead of pressing inward. It was a feeling of safety, of allowance, of being exactly where one needed to be without effort. In remembering unrushed travel, the mind returned to evenings when journeys were part of rest rather than a barrier to it. Travel did not interrupt calm, it prepared the way for it. The ride home was not something to finish before relaxing, it was relaxation already underway. The memory often began with movement, not fast, not precise, but steady, a pace that allowed breathing to deepen and thoughts to soften.
The body remembered how tension faded naturally when nothing demanded speed. There was also the memory of shared stillness, sitting among others without obligation, no need to speak, no need to perform, just the quiet comfort of moving together, guided by the same gentle rhythm. Even alone, one never felt isolated. The journey itself provided companionship. The sounds of those rides lingered in memory as well, not loud or sharp, but familiar and reassuring. The low hum of motion, the faint signals marking progress, sounds that did not disturb rest, but supported it. Looking back, the absence of urgency felt especially striking. There were destinations, of course, but they did not dominate the experience. Arrival was expected, trusted, and therefore unremarkable. The focus rested on the present moment, not the end. These memories carried a sense of completeness. Nothing was missing. The simplicity of the experience, sit, move, arrive, felt sufficient. There was no need to add anything more. As time passed and life grew faster, these recollections became more valuable. They offered contrast. They reminded people that movement did not always have to feel demanding, that time could stretch gently when allowed. In moments of rest, the mind sometimes returned to the image of a quiet street passing by a window, or the steady progression of light fading into evening. These scenes required no effort to recall. They emerged naturally, bringing calm with them. The memory of unrushed travel also shaped expectations. It set a quiet standard for how movement could feel, balanced, respectful, and humane. Even when the world no longer moved that way, the memory remained as a reference point. There was comfort in knowing that such movement had existed, not as an exception, but as a norm. It meant that calm was not an invention, but a return, a familiar state waiting to be remembered. Resting in these memories did not involve longing or regret. It was not about wishing to go back. It was about recognizing the value of slowness and carrying it forward, even in small ways. The body responded to these memories as if they were present experiences. Shoulders eased, breathing slowed. The nervous system recognized the signal and followed it toward rest. In quiet moments before sleep, these recollections felt especially close. The mind, no longer focused on tasks or plans, allowed the memory of gentle movement to surface fully. The sensation of being carried without effort mirrored the transition into sleep. These memories did not ask to be analyzed or explained. They simply offered themselves, bringing with them a sense of grounding and peace. In resting with the memory of unrushed travel, one rested with a deeper understanding that progress and calm do not have to oppose one another, and that even in motion, rest is possible. And as sleep approached, the mind could settle into that truth, carried gently by the remembered rhythm of a journey that never hurried, never strained, and always arrived exactly when it was meant to.